welcome to Let It Be. I'm Vanessa, and this is my little corner of music YouTube. So today I'm going to do another episode of Should It Stay or Should It Go, which is my series of albums that I own in my collection that I think I need to reassess for whatever reason. Maybe I've never heard them and I'm not sure if I even like them, or they're ones that I checked out at some point, wasn't really that big on, and I think I should go back to assess whether or not they should stay in my collection. For a long time, I just collected, and never really got rid of anything. But as I've grown as a collector and as a music fan, I realized the error of that thinking. I would rather my collection reflect things that I actually want. This is my series where I just take some time and take a more mindful approach to assessing what needs to stay or go. Today, my album is going to be Filigree and Shadow by This Mortal Coil. This is a what they call a deluxe edition reissue. More, I think, the art than the actual content because it appears to be pretty well the same. It's very nice packaging, very lush, very pretty. But is it an album that I need to keep? I read a biography or a history about 4 AD a couple years ago, or actually more than a couple years ago, probably more like 4 or 5 years ago. And it I call it a biography because there was a lot about Ivo Watts Russell, of course, because he was 4 AD, especially in those early days. So his story is essential to the story of the label. And it was a really good book. They went into a lot of detail about a lot of the different bands that were on that label and a lot of the recordings and just different stuff like that. So it got me interested in things. And they talked a lot about This Mortal Coil, of course, because that is kind of like a passion project, I guess, for Ivo Watts Russell of sorts. It's like a collective. It was him, and I think he often worked with Simon Raymond from Cocteau Twins and a few other people, but he brought in a rotating cast of singers and different artists to contribute. So it was never like a static lineup or really like a band. It was more of a collective type thing. And they did a lot of covers of songs that were very influential to Ivo and very important to him. And yeah, they took a different approach to a lot of these songs. They really changed them up. So it was pretty cool. Of course, this is the more famous album by the collective, the first one, It'll End in Tears. And that's the one I think most people know. And that's the one that I really knew the best before I read that book. I didn't really even know there were two others. There was Filigree and Shadow that I have here, and there's another one called Blood that I've never heard. Anyway, about 4 or 5 years ago, when I read that book, I had some birthday money. I was at the record store and I saw that there, and they'd been talking about it. It sounded really cool. I knew they covered Gene Clark on it. And I was like, hey, I'll pick this up. This is, what other time would I pick this up? And then I never listened to it. I've had it all these years and I've never had the desire to put it on. So when I was looking at stuff to reassess and go back to, this was a prime candidate because I don't even know if I like it. So anyway, without further ado, here is my run through. I'm going to go side by side, I think is the best way to approach talking about it. But anyway, it is again a collective. So there's a lot of different people on it, but it's different personnel for the most part from this first album. So there's no Elizabeth Fraser, there's no Cindy Sharp, there's nobody that was on there other than the band that worked on the music. So Simon Raymond and Martin Young return, but that's it, other than Ivo Watts Russell, of course. So they do a lot of covers. Like I said, that's pretty well the primary approach. It seems like mostly covers and then some a transitional instrumental music. With the first side, it starts off not the strongest. It's not terrible, but there's not much that really stands out. The cover of The Jeweler is fine, but nothing too exciting. And The Jeweler was originally by Tom Rapp. Um, I prefer the original version of the song, and I'm gonna get into that a little bit, the songs that they cover. The instrumental Ivy and Neat kind of sounds like Live to Tell by Madonna. The songs with vocals stand out more than the instrumentals, and that's pretty true of a lot of the album, but it's especially true of side one. And the best song is pretty easily Tarantula, which is a color box cover. It mixes things up. It's got a nice layered effect on the chorus, and I like the addition of the female vocalists who are Deirdre and Louise Rutkowski. They have a more prominent role here, and that's a real nice change of energy from the rest of the side. The song has like a heavenly element, and it's the only case on the album, or one of the only cases on the album, I think, that I prefer the cover to the original, which was by a more contemporary band, Color Book Box, as I mentioned. They were label mates on 4AD, and this original song was only, I think it was only released a year before this album in 1985. This is 1986. So side two opens with a cover of Judy Collins' song My Father, and that features Alison Limerick on vocals. And I think she's also a welcome addition. A lot of the female vocalists are pretty nice on this. Her voice reminds me of Alison Moyet, and yeah, it's a good cover. The Van Morrison cover kind of floats by a bit and transitions pretty seamlessly from the first song, but this is not really an improvement on the original. I'm not really impressed by this drawn out version. I'm really missing Van's vocals here too, so that really doesn't help. So yeah, that was fine. The side is very heavy on covers. There's only some like short tribal sounding instrumentals in the middle of the side, and it works as a transition, even if it would not be great on its own. It's not something I'd want to listen to by itself, but I think it fits in with the transition of the side. So the big cover on here is Strength of Strings by Gene Clark, and I'm naturally going to be quite critical of this because I love the original. But I don't think it's terrible. I think they are effective at bringing the expansiveness of the original to this completely different style of music, and it's pretty cool, but I'm not sure that it translates to me personally loving it, but I don't hate it either. Like it was a nice surprise. And then they cover Morning Glory, which is a Tim Buckley cover, something that they're quite familiar with because, of course, famously they covered Song to a Siren on the first Mortal Coil album, and they do a lovely job with it, but this does not quite have the same power. It's okay. It's missing Elizabeth Fraser. She was really the big part of what transcended that original cover. So this one is fine. Yeah, it floats by like a lot of the other stuff here. So side three opens with an instrumental called Inch Blue that quickly blends into a cover of I Want to Live by Gary Ogan and Bill Lamb, who I'd never heard of before. And that was a pretty interesting to learn about them. And there's powerful vocals here again from Deirdre and Louise Rutkowski, but it's a bit at odds with the kind of thin sounding keyboards and like programmed drum machine that they have going. I don't know, it didn't totally work for me. It continues with the formula of the instrumentals acting as transitions between the covers. Fire Brothers, originally by the Quicksilver Messenger Service, is an interesting take on the original, but I don't find the cover enjoyable at all. There's panning between the channels on the original, and they redo that on here, but they do it in a way that feels just too extreme, and it's like off-putting. I find the original blends it a lot better than they do here, and they've got echoey vocals, and it makes it kind of unsettling, and I don't find it an enjoyable cover at all. And then they do another Tim Buckley cover, um, and it's fine. It makes sense that there's obviously a huge love for Tim Buckley here, especially where they've covered him before and they do twice on this album, but they just don't have that lightning in a bottle effect on here as they did on the previous record. For side four, they get a little bit more contemporary with their cover choices, and they cover Alone by Colin Newman of the band Wire, of course. The vocal effect that they use almost makes it sound like an insect is singing on the song. It's probably one of the covers that fits the similar vibe to the original out of some of the other ones on here. So that's kind of cool. The Horizon Bleeds and Sucks Its Thumb is one of the transitional instrumentals that I find a little bit more interesting as an individual piece. And it feels like a little bit more, it's doing a little bit more than acting just as a transition, which is cool. A lot of unsettling vibes, which is not unique to this album. There's several that are in the same vein, but this one catches the ear just a little bit more. Interestingly, I'm not sure how great it worked as a transitional piece to the final cover, which is Drugs, originally done by Talking Heads. That song sounds unlike anything else on here as well, so maybe it's just them ending the album. It's more energetic. It's an interesting take on the original song, but nothing that blew me away, of course. Red Rain is the one original with some vocals, albeit wordless ones, where it's like they're reminding you that Elizabeth Fraser is not here. I mean, she wasn't a huge part of the first one either, but that contribution really transcended so much. So it felt like she did more than she did as like track to track, but she's really missed on this, I would say. And it's almost like you keep being reminded of that in some way with the Tim Buckley covers and wordless vocals and anyway. So, as an album, it does its best to keep a continuous vibe going, and I think overall things transition well between songs using the instrumental mood pieces, which is similar to the first album. It adds some interest to the fact that otherwise the album consists just of several covers, but they're interesting reimaginings of the songs. They're not straight ahead covers in really any of the cases, so that is definitely a cool approach. And I think that if nothing else, it makes it interesting, even if you don't necessarily love the result. And I went back and I listened to all the original songs, even the ones that I was familiar with already, just to see how they compared. And that element was cool, really like comparing them cover to original. And I also learned from this about a couple artists that I'd never heard of, like Tom Rapp and the Gary Ogan and Bill Lamb. And I'm curious to hear more from them as I love a good forgotten 70s singer-songwriter record. It's really interesting to see the variety of influences that they are drawing from and reimagining here. They go all over the place, and that's really cool. But ultimately, as far as it being an album that I'm likely to revisit, the possibility is basically non-existent. Like, it's one of those ones, hear it once, that's good, we can move on. The first This Mortal Coil album is a mixed bag for me already, but there is enough on it to draw me back to it occasionally. And that would be the album if I was really craving this sound and wanting to listen to something like this, I would listen to that. And I'm going to keep that, but I would never put this on again. So and it's also missing like key anchor tracks that one has. That one has some covers that really stand out that make the more like the fact that it's a bit of a mixed bag, the ups and downs. It makes that worth it, but this doesn't have anything to really draw you back. So it's cool listen as a curiosity, but I think it's far from essential. And it feels like the work of a collective, which of course it is. So I'm going to give it 3 stars because it's interesting. It's a pleasant enough listen, but it's not one that I would say that I even necessarily like that much. So yeah, it's gonna go, of course. Um, I think that it's an interesting package. It's a really pretty record, of course. So somebody will be happy to add it to their collection, just not me. So anyway, what do you think? Have you heard this particular record, or what do you think of This Mortal Coil or 4AD in general? And no, it was a very pivotal label, especially in the 80s for people who were into underground music, and it was very influential. So it's always cool to hear how that affected people, especially at the time where it was much harder to find a lot of this stuff, especially in North America. So anyway, till next time, bye.